Hello, and welcome to the Back Porch podcast, where I hang out with awesome people, interesting people, and we have conversations about awesome and interesting things. I do have to admit, I am not on the back porch today. It is a million degrees here in Florida, and I will be cheating. So I can see my back porch, but I'm not on it. I think that it counts. Today, my guest is Noah Revoy, and he is an amazing individual who communicates about wonderful things, masculinity, and most recently, manipulation, which is a topic I think that a lot of us are interested in, not just because of recent events, but life experience. Many of us have been manipulated and experienced manipulation. And he's written a book that speaks to it, and I'm diving into it now and enjoying it. And I encourage you to pick it up. But I will let Noah tell you a little bit about himself, and we'll go from there.
Thanks. Yeah, I consider myself mostly a relationship coach, and that's not just like romantic relationships. That's our relationship to other people and to ourselves. And so that can cover everything from, in the workplace to friends and family. And one of the big ones is our relationship to ourselves. That's almost every single client. That's where I end up starting out, is improving how they relate to themselves, how they view themselves, what their own self-image is. And I've been doing this really for most of my life. And there came a certain point where I was so busy helping so many people. And my wife comes to me and says, "We're going to have a baby." And I'm like, "Yeah, this is amazing. It's fantastic. I got to make more money." and I don't have time to help all these people. And so I reluctantly said, "I'm sorry, but I don't have time to help you." And someone said, "Well, what if I paid you?" And so I threw a number out, and he said, "That's too little, but okay, I'll pay you that." And next, ask for more money from the next person. And so since then, I've just been going up and up. And right now, I'm almost completely booked. I barely have room for new clients. And
Wow.
I doubled my rates 2 months ago, and that corresponded with a great influx of clients. So
Yeah.
I know you've said this before. Put your prices up, you get more clients. And
Yeah.
it's true, and it allows you to have, with the clients you do have, to have more of a focus on them when you're charging more. But
Yes.
it's really, people say, "Well, what do you do?" This isn't what I do. This is who I am. I've just found a way to monetize it.
That's awesome. Dude, I think that so many people get stuck on like, what am I supposed to do with my life? Right? What am I supposed to do with my life? It's funny because when you have lived long enough to look backwards on your career experiences to this point, you can truthfully say, if you want to be the best version of yourself, not just in life, but in the workplace, you have to be authentic. And it just sounds so stupid and cliche, but then you recognize those areas where you had the opportunity to be authentic in the past and weren't, and how that always leads to something where there's like a disconnect and a dissonance between who you want to be and who you are. And then if you can find ways to monetize your authentic self, who you are, right, then things just seem to flow naturally. And for me, like, coaching people has been much more of a passion than doing the actual sales jobs that I did in the past. So that when I transitioned from selling, which I was good at, to teaching other people to sell and to teach other people to succeed in that way, it was like everything opened up for me, because that was really what I was passionate about. It's what I really was good at. So, man, I resonate with that, in a big way. And that's a cool, kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, but people will say, follow your passion and then you'll make money. And we know that doesn't exactly how it works. What it is that you've got to be passionate about something that's useful, though.
Yeah.
Something that people want.
Yeah.
And you may also have to reinterpret your passion through a lens of what other people want. I ran a construction home renovation company from about time I was about 19 until about 22 when I moved to Portugal. And the reality is, if I look back on it now, I see it was actually a help poor people to have functional homes company. I was helping people. I just happened to be helping them in a very physical way versus helping them now in a more emotional way. Yeah. But really, that's what I was doing, is helping people. And my passion is to help people.
That's amazing.
And that that can be interpreted in different ways. Now, I did make money as a home contractor, but I didn't make a lot of money because I was great at the helping part. I wasn't all that good at the actual renovation part. I was too slow. And I had to say, I know I love helping people. Why do I love this job? I don't love this job because I love swinging a hammer and cutting wood and accidentally poisoning myself when I cut through a fiber board that's made of, not asbestos, thank God, but other stuff and like temporarily damaging my life. I didn't care for the physical. It's fun to put things together, but I get bored of that pretty quick. What I loved was the sense of satisfaction on people's faces when they saw that their quality of life improved now that they had a functional kitchen instead of like whatever mess they had before I came there. And that's what made me happy. And I realized I could get that kind of feeling other ways. And I started with business coaching. Mm-hmm. And I came here and a lot of entrepreneurs that I knew, their businesses were barely functional. Some months they made nothing. Next month they made enough for 2 months. And it was erratic. Nobody could collect. Portuguese are very polite people, and they were terrible at collecting overdue bills. And so I started to coach people how to structure their business in such a way that they actually got paid. Don't worry about selling more if you're not getting if the people you're selling to aren't paying you. You'll just go bankrupt faster. And so I'd get them these things fixed. But again, I realized that I'm more or less an ascetic. I would love to live in the most simple way possible, and as close to nature and as simple as possible. That's my natural inclination, and money is a very poor motivator for me. I make money because it's fuel for my other goals, but the money itself isn't that interesting. I don't like, collecting ones and zeros is boring.
Yeah.
But I realized it was the helping people that I liked about the business coaching as well. And it didn't take very long to realize that most business problems are actually personal problems.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You can't collect what people owe you because you're conflict avoidant. Okay, so let's deal with your conflict avoidance problems because it's also got you on the verge of a divorce, and your kids won't talk to you because you won't deal with problems. So let's fix this at the root cause. And I got so deep into fixing root cause problems. At a certain point, I did realize I wasn't a business consultant anymore, a business coach. I was actually a relationship coach, and I just happened to get hired by businessmen and women.
That's beautiful. And I think if you zoom out and look at the highest paid business coaches and consultants, look at Tony Robbins, right? Like, is he the best businessman in the world? No, he doesn't know everything about any business. What does he do? He helps people with the relationship with themselves, right? And how is that expression within their business, impacting everything else? So that's an awesome insight with, what you do and how it relates to the individual and how it relates to, their success in that way. I think that's really insightful.
Yeah, Tony Robbins is excellent because he deals a lot with avoiding self-sabotage, like really believing you deserve to have the success you worked so hard for and that you earned. Yeah. And that's huge. Almost every client I work with doesn't believe they deserve the success they have. Yeah. They feel somehow that they've, I don't know, it just magicked itself into place. And I'm like, if you were living on the street and sitting on a pile of garbage, high and drunk, and I asked you how you got there, and you go, I don't know, it just happened. You wouldn't believe that. Then how do you believe all your success just happened?
Yeah. I think the thing that you said there is super impactful because people put their own roadblocks up, right? They put their own roadblocks up without knowing it. And I first kind of discovered that concept in psycho-cybernetics, and I've started seeing it in many other areas. I was reading a book recently about sales, and they were talking about that same concept almost verbatim out of psycho-cybernetics about, what is this self-concept and how have you essentially sabotaged all of those areas of opportunity in your life, relationally, with work, whatever, because what you view yourself to be and what has been expressed as yourself isn't in alignment. And how do you fix that so that you can fix how you view yourself to succeed? That's interesting.
We talk a lot about people being afraid of failure, and they have a fear of failure, so they don't start. I've seen more fear of success in my life than I've seen people with fear of failure.
That's so
Because you have to
interesting.
have a reasonable amount of success to you have to have somewhat got over your fear of failure to call up a stranger and ask for help. So maybe it's bias and selection, but it's far bigger problem to have fear of success than fear of failure.
That's
And
wild.
it's you'd think who has fear of success?
Yeah.
Most people have some fear of success. And the reason is because with success comes responsibility. And we fear that we're not going to be able to handle the responsibility. Okay, look, I could sell this client a 6-figure project. I could sell this client a 7-figure project. I don't know. And I'm working with someone right now. They're like, I want to sell this client this thing. And I'm like, the size of that company, you should be thinking one more, like 10 times bigger than what you're thinking. He says, oh, I don't know if I can deliver that. And I said, who cares? Go and you sell it, and you make sure that your timeline is reasonable enough. You go and find the people you need to deliver the rest of it. If it's profitable, you'll have money to go and make it happen. Don't limit yourself to what you think you can do on your own by yourself. The bigger the project, in a lot of ways, the easier it is to deliver. What's real scary is underselling a project. And if you're like me, I have high conscientiousness. I feel the need to deliver a perfect product every time. Yeah. And if I bid like a just good enough product price, I will still deliver the perfect product because I can't do anything else. I'm not constructed that way. Yeah. And for those who are, that's a viable business model. There's nothing dishonorable about just good enough. But it doesn't work for me. I have to sell the premium product because I do the premium service, whether I want to or not. I don't have a choice. I won't feel comfortable with myself if I don't.
Yeah. Interesting. So tie in for me how we communicate with ourselves, in our perspective of who we are, and ultimately how we manipulate ourselves, because that's something that, like I said, your book addresses something that I think is a really powerful concept, that self-manipulation.
One of the big key points in the book is that you can't be manipulated unless you allow yourself to be manipulated. It is an attack, but a violent attack. You don't have to, let someone hit you. They might be bigger and stronger, and you can't stop them. But for someone to get an emotional reaction in you, and that's exactly what manipulation is. Manipulation is designed, it's social emotional warfare. It's designed to take our natural social and emotional group bond instincts and all that stuff and weaponize it against us. But we can just go, no, I don't care what you think. And then all of a sudden, we have completely taken away the power of that manipulator to elicit a response in us and get us to do what they want. And that can get to be quite difficult. We saw that during COVID, for example. There were people being held down and injected against their will. Not that I saw. I saw that happen to a couple of kids because their parents wanted them injected. And that is a problem. I mean, basically, children are thought of as property in most countries. That's the legal way it's described. So they have the ability to force their kids. But for adults, no one was forcing us, but many people feel they were forced into it because they were manipulated. But they could have said, I had someone said to me, if I don't, I'll lose my job. And I said, and then what? I said, well, then I won't have money to pay for my house. And I'm like, and then what? Well, then I'll have to downgrade to a smaller house. And then what? Well, I'll be fine. So basically, there's no consequences, like not really. Yeah. 20 years from now, are you going to go, I wish I'd got that vaccine? Like, it doesn't work that way. But people felt it worked that way. Why? Because inside of them, they had a self-manipulation that said, I have established some goals for myself. And one of those is acceptance by my community. And the leaders in my community are telling me I have to do this thing. And this acceptance to me is so important that I'm willing to ignore whatever risks are involved to go out and get that acceptance. And we've manipulated ourselves into believing that the opinions of strangers matter. Their opinions do not matter. And they certainly don't matter more than our own opinion and our own needs and the needs and opinions of those who are close to us and love us. Even for most of us, our doctor is a stranger. I mean, if you're spending enough time with your doctor that he's your friend, you got other health, you got problems that, they're beyond probably what modern medicine can handle. But if like I have doctors who are friends, but they're not necessarily my doctor.
Right.
So your doctor is essentially a stranger. And if you're a doctor, you have to be okay with occasionally killing patients, because you will. All doctors kill patients. And I'm not saying that to condemn doctors. If you've got 5,000 or 6,000 patients and you see them once a year, you're going to make a mistake at some point and someone's going to die. And we know this because there's medical malpractice insurance. It wouldn't exist if medical malpractice didn't exist, because you wouldn't have to insure against it. And again, this is not to condemn doctors specifically, but to think that our doctor has our best interests at heart. Doctors are really going to work and thinking about what is good for them, which that's what most people do. That's what we probably should do in our life, is what's good for me. And they have influences from the companies they work for, from the pharmaceutical companies that fund the university they went to and the hospital they work at, and may now own the loan, their loan for their school and other things like this.
Yeah.
They are government licensed professionals, which means they operate at the government's good graces. So the government says, we don't like you anymore. You're not a doctor. That happened here in Portugal. Fortunately, a bunch of retired doctors took up the mantle and said, hey, we shouldn't be vaccinating kids. And the government backed down on it, and you can't fire them. They already retired.
Yeah.
So one of the doctors said that. He says, I'm retiring now. It was probably his time to retire anyway. He says, I'm retiring now. He says, because then I can say that I can finally speak the truth. What does that mean for the other time that he was a doctor? He was afraid to speak the truth. He was afraid. So they kept that over him, manipulating him. Whereas if you're a doctor and you say, I'm going to say things that are controversial, you get fired. Then what do you do? Then you start even you lose your license. Then what do? You start your own wellness clinic and you make 4 times what you would have made as a doctor.
Yeah.
The consequences of standing up to the manipulation are generally not as bad as we believe they are. And it's extremely important to the industrial level manipulation that we believe the consequences will be life ending. Your grandma will die if you don't do this.
Yeah.
That's manipulation.
I can tell you from my own experience in corporate America before I left and started my own business, my company had started instilling all this critical race theory stuff. And we had to go through these like indoctrination trainings where they were telling us just the most ridiculous things. Like, because I was a white Christian male, married to a woman, I was the most oppressive individual possible. Right. What? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So, as a result of that, I was just so uncomfortable because at the time I hadn't really evaluated my own manipulations, what was taking place. And as COVID broke out immediately, after that, around that same time, I started to evaluate all of those inputs, right? And see with clarity that I was just constantly being manipulated. And it was a struggle for me because I recognized that personally, I didn't do a good job of standing up to manipulation in the past. And as a result, I had a lot of regret about the things that I had done instead of what I hadn't done, right? So part of me leaving was directly tied to a decision to just end the manipulation. It was wild.
Yeah. And sometimes we have to walk away from it. I do along that lines. I do think it's funny when they tell you, straight white men are history's greatest oppressors, the most violent people in all of history, and have murdered so many people. And you think pissing us off is the right path to go down after explaining this to us? Like, are you poking the bear for a reason? What do you expect to get out of this? But
such a good
sometimes the manipulator is someone that loves us and is afraid and trying to get their needs met and doesn't know how to do it. And, you know, normally violence is a domain of men, manipulation is a domain of women. However, women can be violent, men can manipulate. It just tends to filter more in those directions. So if your wife is manipulating you, it doesn't mean that she's evil and you should divorce her, of course. In fact, if we were to cut off every single person that tried to manipulate us, we'd be all alone. There wouldn't be anybody around. What we do instead is we help them, and we have to see it as helping them. That mindset really makes it a lot easier. We help them to redirect their energy away from manipulation towards persuasion so that they can get their needs met without damaging the relationship with us. This is why I mentioned conflict avoidance earlier. A lot of people are conflict avoidant because the only way they know how to get their needs met is through manipulation. And they know that if they use that on their spouse, they'll get their needs met, but they'll damage the relationship and they have no way to repair it. And so if at least someone in the family, and it doesn't have to be the husband, it doesn't have to be why somebody needs to set a pattern where they say, with me, manipulation doesn't work, but you can still get your needs met. And here's how, and explain that to them. And that's where persuasion comes in. And, you know, you're in sales, and basically ethical sales is all about persuasion. It's all about creating the win-win situation. A lot of people who don't know anything about sales, they view salesmen as like some kind of slimy rats that trick people into buying stuff. And I'm sure there are salesmen like that, but that's not actually a very good way to make money, because long-term, you can't retain clients who feel that they've been ripped off.
Yes.
Even if it is fair, they have to feel it was fair too. They have to feel, ideally your client should feel like they got such a good deal that they almost stole it from you. That's how they should feel. And if you can get to that point where you've offered so much value that people feel that it was the best thing ever to work with you, you don't have to do this hard sales tactics. You don't have to pressure people. You know, there is pressure in persuasion as well. There's nothing wrong with pressuring people. There are people who are incredibly indecisive and they cannot make decisions, and their lives are falling apart while they sit there twiddling their thumbs. And we sit down and go, look, dude, you got to make a decision. Like, you know, you know what my grandpa said, piss or get off the pot, you know, you got to do it. It's got to be done. And we're helping people by helping them to make a decision. And like I always say, no, I don't want to work with you is an okay decision. That's fine. I'm okay with that. But you got to come to some sort of conclusion of what you want to do with your life. And we do this in our family by encouraging people to resolve their problems and letting them know that we won't pay the cost of their mistakes. I say to my son, hey, it's okay. You made a mistake. No problem. You clean it up. I don't mind if you make mistakes. I don't mind if you do things wrong. I tell my wife the same. You know, oops, I broke a expensive dish. And I'm like, well, that happens. You know, clean it up. And now you just don't have that nice dish anymore to cook with for a while. And, you know, maybe in a few months we'll buy a new one. But for a while you won't have it. I'm not going to really suffer. It's going to be her suffering. Why do I get upset about it? It's not, it's not something I should be upset. What we want to do is so here's a great example of manipulation in a marriage. So we have, you know, the wife wants something. She wants, let's say, more time with her husband. And the way she does it is to say, if you spend more time with me, we'll have more sex. Now, she doesn't say that in that many words because women don't tend to say exactly what they want. Because if they did, they wouldn't need to manipulate, because most of the time we will give our wife whatever she wants, because as long as it's reasonable, hey, it makes us happy to give. So she will withdraw affection because she wants more attention. And what does the man perceive this as? Oh, she's not interested anymore. She doesn't like me. I'll just give her some space. And that pisses her off more, so she withdraws more attention. And okay, so then it gets to a certain point where she realizes that tactic's not working. So what should she do? I know. If withdrawing doesn't get attention, I'm going to be annoying. Then she'll intentionally annoy you. She'll intentionally inflict, emotional damage, on you. She's gonna say things to you. She's gonna poke you, trying to get a response. And the man is like, "No, I'm going to keep frame. I'm not going to give any response to this. I'm not going to let her get a response out of me." And he just tries to be all stoic, or he gets mad and leaves the room and maybe goes for a walk or whatever. And the whole time, her need for attention isn't getting met. So she's not happy. It's a loser for her.
Yeah.
You're not happy because you're like, what the heck is wrong? Is she nuts? And nobody is happy. And if you're a husband in this kind of a situation, what you do is you say, I see you're kind of pulling away. Are you okay? Anything wrong? Do you need something? And then be open to the fact that she may not be super clear about it the first times. Part of the thing is people in general are not clear about expressing their needs, because if I express a need to you, that opens a vulnerability. Mm-hmm. If I say to you, look, man, I need to sell another $80,000 of business this year, and I can't do it on my own. I need your help. Are you going to then use that to like twist my arms behind my back and get the best deal out of it for you? Okay, if we trust each other, probably not. But most people have a difficult time trusting, even in a healthy, trusting relationship, because there's so much manipulation, and it burns out our ability to trust. And for the woman to specifically ask for what she needs, you have to be very clear. I've heard guys, what does your wife want? And they'll say something, and the guy will go, that's ridiculous. and it's like, what I say to my wife is, tell me what you want, and it can be completely irrational. I don't care. It's okay. Because sometimes she'll say things and she'll say, I know that sounds kind of irrational. I'm like, well, yeah, it does, but that's okay. You're allowed to have your feelings even when they're irrational. My son especially has that. Little children and women have a lot of behavioral patterns that overlap. Let's just put it that way. And so my son will say that to me and be like, I know it doesn't make sense, but I don't want to, I climbed that tree yesterday, but now today I'm afraid of climbing. I don't know why. And I'm like, oh, then don't climb it today if you don't want, but at some point you're going to have to face that fear. And very often, just by allowing him, and this works with your wife as well, allowing them to process that emotion, there's often nothing for you to do. Like they don't even necessarily want you to do anything. They want you to help facilitate their processing of their emotion. And then after that, you ask, was there anything you wanted me to do? We can train our wife to be more explicit in what she asks us. My wife says to me, Noah, could you bring me one of the kids? And I'll be like, I could. And I keep on my computer. 2 minutes later, Noah, could you bring me one of the kids? I'm like, yes, I could. Typing. Did you want me to do anything? Yes. What did you want me to do? Well, bring me one of the kids. I'm like, oh, I thought you were just asking if I could do it. Now, I know that's annoying and pedantic, but I got frustrated with the half requests, and I tried that, and in a space of about 3 months, it ended, and now she asks for what she wants. And I did explain to her what I was doing as well. Yeah. So it wasn't a complete secret. And it even helped her in her relationships with other people because she started being more direct.
I think I see that a lot because people are afraid to ask directly because they're afraid that somebody will feel put upon or they will feel like this person's being aggressive in a request. When all that both parties want are clarity and action in that moment. And if both parties understood what the other was doing and needed, then neither side would be upset. But in introducing kind of half requests or lack of clarity, both sides end up frustrated, right? Nobody's moving this forward. So I see that, I think, a lot, not just, obviously in marriage that can happen a lot, but in any situation.
Happens in business.
Show itself.
It happens in business, and it can actually get people killed. After the, I think it was the 7-Day War in, it's when the Arab countries south of Israel attacked through, I think it was through the Sinai Peninsula. They attacked Israel, and then Israel did a counterattack, which captured a bunch of territory that had belonged to Israel or belonged to Egypt before. So then they had some peace talks, and Egypt demands, we are not going to talk about anything until Israel agrees to give us back the land they took. And Israel says, we're not going to talk about anything until, we feel secure. We're offered something that makes us feel safe.
Yeah.
And there's nothing going back and nobody's even meeting with each other to talk. And the intermediaries are trying to figure out what's going on. And really what it was that there was a solution that made everybody happy in the end, which was to create a demilitarized zone between, so Egypt can start to administer that territory again, but it wouldn't be like armed soldiers on the border of Israel. Okay, nobody likes to have armed enemies like 2 feet outside your wall,
Yeah.
And I mean, we could have learned something about that in what's happening now with Russia and Ukraine. This is not, everything that happened there was obvious. The only thing that came as a surprise is Russia getting bogged down in Ukraine. But everything else was obvious. The fact that it would turn into a war, it was a matter of when, not if.
Right. Yes.
And this is this is the international results of manipulation.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Everybody manipulating, nobody being, although Putin did have some times when he was being honest about, like, if you do this, we're going to attack. And no, that wasn't taken seriously. And here's the problem. If you're manipulative some of the time, when you're honest, no one's going to take you seriously. And so you have to decide, I won't use manipulation anymore. This is how you beat the manipulators. You get out of the manipulation game. You use manipulation on me, I will call it out. If you're on my side, if you're my friend, I'll call it out nicely and with love and respect, but I'm not going to let it work on me. And I will help you to figure out how to get to a persuasive argument that will work. And if it's an enemy, you have to understand you can use manipulation in defense, just like you can use violence in defense, but there will be a cost. You will not always be taken seriously. If you say, yeah, do that, we'll bomb you, do that, and this will be the consequence. And every time you follow through on what you say, it gets to a point where you don't have to threaten anymore. Look, all of the threats that are going on right now, it's because nobody believes anybody or takes anybody seriously. So the threats have to be cartoonishly massive. Yeah. And we're facing that in every aspect of society, that all of the consequences of the manipulations have piled up. We've been kicking the can down the road with fiat currency for like 150 years. Well, with central banking is really the problem for like 100 years now. We've been kicking the can down the road socially since the end of the Second World War. And we're now at a point where all of these accounts are coming due, and nature can't be manipulated. Nature makes its accounting ruthlessly. It's like trying to rip off the mob. It'll take an arm and a leg until you pay. Yeah. And that's what's going to happen in society. And we're now at a point where, as individuals, we have to create our own structures, parallel structures to society, so that when society collapses, there's something else. I'm not saying necessarily competing structures at the moment, but parallel. Yeah. And we can't do that if we base it on the same bad base that society is based on, of manipulations. We have to be truthful with each other. We have to be reciprocal. One of my friends pointed out the other day that really the determinant of manipulation was the agreement reciprocal? So is it a win-win? Yeah. And if it's not, however you were convinced to agree to it, it's manipulation.
That's good. That makes perfect sense. I think that it's really interesting because you mentioned kind of the scale of manipulation can be huge, but the core of manipulation remains the same. I read Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell many years ago, and what was interesting was his concepts of you get what you incentivize, right? And his concept of scale was, what makes sense when you're talking about 5 people still makes sense when you're talking about a nation. Logic didn't change because scale changed, and incentivization doesn't change when you go from small to large. And I think manipulation is the same way, because as you mentioned, when you're talking about international relations, people are people, right? It doesn't matter if you're talking about 2 kids on a block, or you're talking about 2 massive nations. The communication remains between people. So that manipulation makes sense. When you're talking about, if you cross this line, we're going to bomb you, and then we don't. Well, they're not going to trust our word, right? We've lost our trust. Now, if we say that we're going to do it and we do it, after that, there's confusion. We have to be consistent over time to bring belief back into that statement, right? That's exactly the same, with a nation as it is with an individual. If it's a husband and wife and he says something and doesn't follow through, he has to follow through for a long period to prove that he's no longer manipulating with those statements, and he's instead bringing, honesty and truth to the forefront. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Manipulation leaves this legacy of distrust,
Mm-hmm.
and persuasion, that is honest negotiation and agreement, leads to trust. But all of these things take take time, and trust is something you build. So it's very easy to destroy. It's very hard to build. Building anything is going to be more time consuming, energy consuming. You can see this with your kids, for example. People will say, well, I don't understand why my teenagers are so rebellious. They're not really rebelling against what you believe in. They're rebelling against you manipulating them since they were born to try to believe the same things you're believing in.
Mm.
If I can't make a good argument to my son why he should believe something, then how can I make that a prerequisite of being in our family and being in good standing? My son, this is one of my son's issues. He said, why is swearing bad? Mm. He says, I understand you don't want me to do it, but why is it bad? What's the moral implication of this? And I can't make a good moral argument to him that using certain words is morally wrong. So the argument I made is it is aesthetically displeasing, and you will get negative results or responses from most people when they see a small child swearing like a sailor. Because kids will swear like mad if they haven't been taught not to, because it's fun. Right. I mean, swearing's fun. Yeah. And so I explained that to him so he understands, and I still see him by himself swearing up a storm about something. But he understands that if he's outside, if he's in public, that he's going to get a bad response from that. And that in order for him to navigate the social preferences and aesthetic preferences of other people, those are important. Other people's aesthetic preferences are important. You have to behave in a pro-social manner. And it's the same reason that in the West, if I stick my hand out like this to shake your hand, I don't have to tell you to shake my hand. You just do it automatically because we're programmed. We have this aesthetic agreement between us that that's how we greet each other, whereas the Japanese do it with a bow. Mm. It's not a right or wrong issue. It's that's the aesthetic cultural norm in that place. And so you follow it for that reason. And a lot of what we do is you're using manipulation to get people to agree with us. Mostly because we don't have a good argument about why things should be done our way. Because if we had a good argument, we could use that instead.
Yeah, I think the most powerful concept to me is that manipulation really becomes the norm, not because we like it and we like it how it feels, but because it's an action of last resort that we know works in some situations. And so it tends to happen in those moments. And people who are very manipulative, maybe they just find themselves without any other tools to communicate, right? And when you're talking about how to parent, right, that really resonates. I have 4 sons, and I've got a whole gambit, 12 to 9 months, and my wife and I talk about how do we communicate these things to them in a way that makes sense. And there's such clarity in stating, I'm going to do it in a way that eliminates manipulation, so that when they call this into question in the future, there's no question about either my, intent and why I wanted to communicate that to them, but also about the reasoning to begin with, right? You don't give them some fairy tale because that's what you use to manipulate them into this belief. And later they say, you lied to me. And you're like, well, yeah, but it was for your own good, right? Like that's a classic follow-up, to that type of manipulation. Well, what does that lead to, right? Ultimately, that leads to the distrust and the issues in that relationship. And to come from a point of clarity and communication to say, I will eliminate manipulation in this relationship so that as you grow, I'm giving you the right to learn, grow, and believe as you see fit based on the foundation of truth, not based on anything else. And that truth can be, this is what we believe historically as a group, so we all kind of move in this direction. But if that's all you've got, then that's all you can give them. Don't make up anything additional, right? I think that's amazing.
Yeah, historical norms and aesthetic preferences of the group are part of the group's survival strategy. And hey, if the group is doing well, then it's worked so far. You might want to keep trying this. And it really helps the kids. So society needs to have a certain conservation of the past. We can't change everything every generation. Yes. That's I think it was Thomas Sowell, as you mentioned before, who said 20th century has been finding new ways to do things wrong. To do all the things we did before were right, to do them wrong. And different isn't necessarily better. And in fact, until you have an objectively better way to do things, you shouldn't be, quote unquote, improving how you're running society. On the other hand, we shouldn't be so bound to tradition because it's tradition that we're not able to open our minds up to the fact that this might need to be modified for modern times. And so that balance, that works when your goal is the truth versus goal is do what you were pressured into doing. And you will see this in places like, Japan is very much what you call a face before truth culture. And especially, now that is adjusting in there as well, but especially during say the medieval period, they closed Japan for 400 years. And during that time, they had not a single innovation. In 400 years, millions of people didn't come up with anything new. In fact, their ability to work military weapons decreased slightly in that time. So they actually, there's no such thing as standing still. You're either moving forward or going backwards. Yeah. So they slightly decreased because they decided to keep everything the same. And then why? Because it was what we did last week. We're going to do it again this week. And that was, a mass manipulation. But because you have a society that's more worried about looking bad than telling the truth, it worked on them. Now, in the West, we have a lot of conflict. We mentioned that earlier. We are the most conflict, what's the opposite of avoiding? Conflict-seeking people in history. We love fighting. We love arguing. We love discussing things. And we're passionate about our interests. And we actually, though, have a truth before face culture. So most of the time, we're discussing these things on a more truthful basis. I mean, we're perfect. If you have a face before truth culture, you will speak the truth as well. It's just that's not the focus or the priority. And that has created history's most vibrant, most innovative, and quite frankly, I think most beautiful culture. If you look at traditional European clothes and all these things, gorgeous, gorgeous architecture in the wonderful churches and political buildings of Europe. And that happened because we like conflict around truth. What is truth? Pontius Pilate asked Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ says, I'm the way and the truth and light. And Pontius Pilate says, what is truth? And he was saying it sarcastically, but that was a question on the mind of everyone from the Hellenistic period onward in Europe. What is truth? That was a huge question, and some tried to answer it. Some answered it better than others. I do think that it is possible to discover truth. Well, what I've done with the manipulation book, so I spent a lot of time trying to teach people how to identify the truth. And I realized that not everyone has the training or the intellectual capacity or the energy to pursue truth in every single area of life so they know everything. So what I decided instead is teach people how to identify and protect themselves from lies and manipulation. So if you can't identify the truth, you can at least eliminate all the worst lies and make them not work on you. You don't need to know why something's a lie. You see 2 or 3 signs that's a lie. How much deeper do you need to look into it?
So good. Yes.
You know? And if we had a society that viscerally at their gut level said, I hate being manipulated. No, I won't listen to that. No, you tell me I can't eat meat. I should eat veggie burgers. No. I'm never going to touch veggie burgers. This feels like manipulation. It follows some of the identifications, what I can see as manipulation, and I'm just going to go the opposite direction. And it may mean we sometimes still get tricked. I say immune to manipulation. Doesn't mean you won't get tricked from time to time, but you won't go too far down that bad road before you figure out where you are. And that's my goal for society. This book is not about helping the individual reader. It's about the effect that reader will have on everyone in his life when he or she says, I'm not going to allow myself to be manipulated or to use manipulation in my relationships. That's
amazing.
That adjusts, that changes how everyone around you functions, and it will have a ripple effect. And I really hope, I know this is going to change culture. This is the right medicine at the right time, and we need it more than ever in 2022.
I couldn't agree more. And I bought it. It's amazing. It is Become Immune to Manipulation. How are they manipulating you? And how to resist it. That key is huge, right? And I encourage everybody to pick it up. I bought it because I believe in the message. I believe in Noah, and I believe that as a society, we have willingly bought into obvious manipulations. And this book is the antidote. It is the start of a movement to truth. So I think this is a spectacular point to kind of wrap up and push forward. So again, buy the book, read it, reach out to Noah, particularly if you find yourself unable to address those things on your own. He's able to work with you to overcome those things as his specialty. So Noah, tell me, how can people get in contact with you? How can they continue the conversation?
Best way, go to noahrevoy.com and click on a discovery call there, and we'll talk. Better than text. Text, there's no context. Set up a meeting, talk to me for half an hour. Tell me what's hurting, basically. It's like going to the doctor. What hurts? And I'll tell you how we can work together to solve your problems.
Amazing. No, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like the amount of time that we've had is too short, but that means that we get to do this again sometime. So I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate the conversation, and I look forward to completing the book and letting you know what I thought about the end.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thanks for having me on.
You got it, brother. You have a good one.